Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to On the House, the Household Management Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Yastra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's begin.
Hello and welcome back to On the House, the Household Management Science Insights podcast. Microplastics are turning up everywhere from mountains to the shores, and according to researchers, this poses several health threats, and the top culprit for this is laundry. All of this to say, microplastics are certainly not a micro problem, but a macro one for the environment, but one that we can alleviate or reduce right in our homes. So today we're speaking to Judith Weis, Professor Emerita of Biological Sciences at Rutgers University, to learn more about microplastics, how they affect us, and what changes we should be making to our laundry. Hi Judith, it's lovely having you on the show. How are you going today?
Well, it's good to be seeing you halfway across the world.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to talk to you too. Now, before we begin and before we get further into detail, we'd love to get to know you better. So this is, have you met Judith? My first question for you is, how do you like to spend your spare time?
My spare time, which isn't that much, but I like to sing in choruses. So I go to have evening rehearsals for 2 different choruses. I also sometimes am in the chorus of operas or operettas or shows. So that's one of my major pastimes, I guess. And
That's
I also
amazing.
like to go out for walks, and I like in the warm weather, I like to go swimming.
So how often is that chorus practice that you have?
It's once a week for each chorus. And the week before we give a concert, we have additional rehearsals.
That's amazing. And aside from that, do you happen to read any books or watch films or TV shows that you've enjoyed?
So I read books a lot and, go to the movies sometimes and so forth. Do all those kinds of things.
What kind of genres do you tend to gravitate towards?
Kind of genre
Yeah.
for books?
Yeah.
Well, I like novels. I like mysteries. I like science books too. I often read, books about animals and books about the ocean.
And are there any that you would call favorites?
Well, it's an old book that goes back to when I was very young. Rachel Carson's book, The Sea Around Us, was very inspiring. And I believe that was instrumental in me deciding I wanted to be a marine biologist.
Wow. That's such a life-changing book. When did you read it?
I read it as a teenager. I think I was in high school. I was leaning toward the sciences always, but that book stirred up my interest in the ocean and the marine world. And I read several others by her and other people. And that's sort of, I think, an inspiration for my career, my life.
Amazing. And what was it about that book that invoked that passion for marine biology?
I think it's partly her writing style. She's so poetic and descriptive in a beautiful use of language. Now, I've written a number of books myself about marine, about fish, about crabs, about salt marshes, so forth. I can't write like she does. I really wish I could. But her writing style was just so poetic, and mine isn't.
Yeah, some people just have the natural gift for it. I feel like I have a similar experience myself. There are so many writers that I really, really look up to because they have a certain way of writing that just invokes emotion in you, and they do it so effortlessly as well, not over the top. And no amount of reading and scouring through the thesaurus or the dictionary for newer, better words or more apt words can really replicate that gift for it. Um, so I totally agree with you there. And in your lifetime, would you consider her to be a role model at all?
I mean, I have spent most of my life writing technical papers for other scientists. And about 15 years ago, I started writing books for the general public. So it was a major learning experience, and taking the information and putting it in plain English and getting rid of the highly technical terms or explaining them. So it's a very different sort of writing, but there's still, even when I'm doing that kind of writing, I don't have the kind of poetic talent that Rich Carson had. I do my best, but it's not. I cannot write the way she did, and I wish I could. But
Yeah, well, I've read a couple of your articles that you've put out about microplastics, and they were so aptly written, and I pretty much understood everything, almost everything, at least, I think. So
this is articles in technical journals.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, not the full. I've read the ones on the conversation.
Okay, that one. Yes.
Yeah, those ones. And those are really well explained. So you might not be able to write like was it Rachel Carlson? But you have your own special gift, and that's to explain it in layman's terms. So if you think about it, it's a different talent. So I would pat myself on the back if I had that.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Conversation is a good publication for writing to the general public and not technical science.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like we got to know you a bit better. So now we'll move on to the interview section. And for starters, the first question I want to ask is, what are microplastics? Why are they becoming such a significant concern for environmental science?
Okay, so, microplastics are tiny particles, tiny pieces of plastic. They come often from breaking up of larger things like plastic bottles that fragment into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. They also are sometimes manufactured directly as tiny particles that were put into some cosmetics, facial scrubs, and so forth, because of being somewhat abrasive. The first laws dealing with microplastics dealt with the cosmetics and said, no more plastic in cosmetics. The US and most of the EU passed laws like that in the 20 teens. I imagine Australia did too. I don't know. There are other tiny separate particles that are called nurdles, Nurdles. Nurdles are pre-manufactured tiny pellets about the size of lentils that are the beginning, they are what's originally made, and then they are then turned into bottles and radios and computers and everything else that's got plastic in it, plastic bags, so forth. And these nurdles have come into some publicity recently because they've had spills of millions of them off of ships carrying them, and they spill millions of these things. Last year or 2 years ago, there was a spill on Sri Lanka, and the beaches there were several feet high in these nurdles, and so that's how people have heard about them. Other sources of microplastics are tires. When tire treads get thinner and thinner, when you use your car more and more, your tire tread thins out. Now, most people never thought about what happened to that. This just vanished into air, didn't just vanish. It went onto the road. It's as tiny micro pieces of, tires are not just rubber. They're largely plastic these days. And so that's another source of microplastics in the environment. And the major source are actually tiny fibers that come off our clothing. If we say the people that look at the microplastics in the ocean and lakes and so forth, the most common shape, they come in many different shapes. They come round, they come as fragments, they come as thin films, and they come as long, thin fibers. And these long, thin fibers are the most common type they find in the waters. And where do these plastic fibers come from? Primarily from our clothing. When we wash our clothing in a washing machine, it loses many thousands of these tiny fibers that will go out with the laundry, with the wash water, and go down probably to the sewage treatment plant, which will capture most of them. But we're talking about many, many thousands. So the perhaps 5% that's left going into the water body still is a huge number. And so clothing is the major source of these microfibers. They also come off of rugs in houses. They come off our clothes when we wear them, not only when we wash them. We walk around, we're shedding microfibers all over the place. And those are now in the air. When the clothing is made, the manufacture process, a lot of microfibers are coming off then. And when clothes are discarded at the end of life and go to a dump somewhere, whatever happens, they're shedding more microfibers all the time. In manufacture, in wearing, in washing, and in the end of life. But the largest amount coming out at any one time is through the laundry, washing and drying. Going through a dryer sends them out into the air. So they're not just a water pollution issue, they're an air pollution issue also. And they're also a soil pollution issue. We have in agriculture plastic sheets that are put down on the soil in farming, and they are shedding microplastics into the soil. And so they have looked for microplastics and remote tops of mountains, miles and miles away from anywhere, and they find them. They've looked at them in the deepest trenches of the ocean, and they find them. So they are basically everywhere.
And what kind of risk does that pose for us?
It's not clearly established. We know they have been found in human tissues. They've been found in the heart. They've been found in blood vessels. They've been found in liver. They've been found in muscle. They've been found in blood. So they are in our bodies. We eat them, we breathe them, and the smallest ones, a certain amount of what we eat, we poop out. That's fine. Some of what we breathe back out again. But some of it is retained, and we have them throughout our bodies, as does probably every organism on the planet by now. And we know more about the effects in other organisms because we can do experimental studies to look. Finding out what it does in people, you're not going to do experiments on people. So it's known, for example, that human testes, male reproductive organ, seem to all have microplastics in them. We also know that over the past 60, 70 years, since plastics are around, the sperm count in people around the world has been going down. We can't say that microplastics cause the sperm count to go down, but there's some circumstantial evidence there. Perhaps it does. They're both happening at the same time. And we do know that the microplastics contain lots of toxic chemicals, some of which are known to affect the endocrine system, like the testes, which is putting out hormones. So, there's circumstantial evidence, not proof of harm, but there is clear proof in many other animals that have been experimented on, from tiny plankton to fish to crabs to rats and mice in laboratories. There is quite a bit of evidence. For people, again, it's circumstantial, but it things that are happening to other animals, why would we be exempt from those things? Well,
yeah, absolutely. And what are some examples of synthetic fabrics that are commonly found within the household industry, that household laundry, that largely contribute to microplastic shedding?
Well, polyester is a major one, and there are other blends and nylon and other, the polyester and polyester blends. Any chemical that's called poly something is probably a plastic. Poly refers to the fact that you've got a molecule and a whole bunch of the same molecule hooked up together in a line. So you could have a chemical, an organic chemical called ethylene. And you put a whole bunch of them together, you got polyethylene. So that's plastics are all polymers like that. And, there are many different kinds, and some of them are more problematic than others. Some of them are able to be recycled. Others of them really can't get recycled. And when it comes to recycling, even if we've got the same chemical, if they're different colors, you can't mix them together. If you've got a white piece and a red piece and a black piece, they can't get recycled together. So the recycling for plastic is a major failure around the world because you've got many different kinds of plastic. You can't put together polypropylene with polystyrene or polyethylene. They all have to go separately. And then different colors have to go separately. And the whole thing really doesn't work anywhere near as well as recycling of metals or paper does. The industry would like you to think that recycling is the answer, but it really isn't.
And what are the specific types of fabrics or materials that are most notorious for releasing microplastics in laundry?
Well, any synthetic will be releasing. I think, maybe acrylic may not release I'm not 100% sure of this, but acrylic may not release as much as polyester. But all of the synthetic are going to be releasing a lot of microplastics, microfibers in the laundry when it's washed.
So, are there any ways to reduce microplastic shedding during laundry without tossing out our already owned synthetic fabrics?
Yes, there are ways of reducing the amount of shedding. If you wash full loads rather than partial loads, if you use cooler temperature on the cold rather than hot cycle, if you don't put in fabric softener, if you reduce the amount of detergent, that will all reduce the shedding. Also, if you use a front-loading washing machine rather than a top-loading washing machine, they will shed less in the front-loading machine.
Oh, that's interesting. Why is that?
Why is that? I think it's because of the amount of friction and rubbing the fabric has with itself and with other fabrics. If you're getting tossed around, it's sort of gentler than the action. Nobody can see me, right? This is a podcast, but I'm twisting my hand around back and forth. The sort of back and forth action in a top loader seems to me would provide more friction on the fabric with itself or with other fabrics. And that's probably why it sheds more in the top loading machine.
Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned that using less detergents will help with the microplastic shedding. Does the type of detergent also affect the amount of microplastic shedding?
I don't know. You mean a different brand or something?
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know that, but one thing I recommend with regard to detergent is that, standard detergent comes in a plastic bottle. There are now detergents available as flat sheets that are is like 2 inches, and a number of different brands that make them like these sheets. So you don't have to deal with a plastic bottle with using the detergent. So that's not particularly microplastic, but the plastic bottle be one less plastic bottle.
Yeah, I also did. I read somewhere that when plastic comes in contact with, I can't remember exactly what it is, so I might be wrong, but I read something somewhere that suggested that when plastic is used, is in contact with liquid for a very extended amounts of time, the plastic then kind of maybe dissolves is not the right word, but bits of plastic can be found in the liquid afterwards. So would that contribute potentially to microplastic shedding?
It probably could. Plastic will shed the microplastics, when, I don't know if it's like this in Australia. It's been a long time since I've been in Australia, but here in the U.S., plastic water bottles are so popular. Drinking water bottles, a liter or a half liter with a plastic top. And recent study showed that 1 liter of water out of a plastic water bottle has about almost 250,000 tiny microplastic particles in it. That's like 240,000 in a liter of water, it's microplastics and nanoplastics together. Nanoplastics are smaller than microplastics, much less studied. It's a lot more study, but so tiny. The nanoplastics are the ones that are most likely to be penetrating all throughout our tissues. And putting them together, the micro and the nano together, in a liter of bottled water, it's almost 250,000. which is a huge number. To think that's a liter of water is not such a big deal. And people are drinking out of plastic bottles all the time. And here in New York, where I am, the tap water is healthy and delicious. And I don't understand why I see people coming back from the grocery store with bottles and bottles and bottles of water that are not as healthy as the water out of the tap.
That's interesting. It sounds like there are so many different sources of microplastics, and it's going to take work from all angles to really reduce this issue significantly.
Well, it's going to take a lot. Some things will be sort of behavioral changes in the general population. If your tap water is safe, don't buy bottled water. That's one thing. But what we need is strong legal changes in different countries. We also have being negotiated the past year or 2 years is an international treaty on plastics. They had their most recent meeting in Ottawa, Canada, and I'm part of a coalition of scientists that participates in these meetings. And we provide scientific information about microplastics, about the chemicals in the plastics, about how to make a circular economy, a different aspect, different specialty of the scientists that are creating position papers. And there at the negotiating meetings to provide unbiased information. Also at these meetings, the last meeting in Ottawa, there were about 200 lobbyists from the plastic industry. So I'm not, if those 200 lobbyists who are very effective are listened to more than the scientists are, I'm not terribly optimistic that this treaty, there's supposed to be only one more meeting in Korea later this year. And I'm not too optimistic about it because the lobbyists can have a major effect and negate the facts that the scientists present.
Yeah.
There have been also a bunch of bills in the U.S. and in the different states to control plastics. So, there are efforts. I don't know what's the situation in Australia. I imagine Australia is trying to deal with it too. You must have lots of microplastic issues or big plastic issues in Australia as well.
I personally am not very well informed on this, so I am unsure. But what are the scientists recommending to the people who do the treaty? I'm sorry, I don't know how any of this works.
They're advocating for significant reductions in plastic production because we have more and more plastic, hugely more plastic every year, and it doesn't go away. And it is piling up in landfills. It is piling up in the ocean. It is something that just doesn't go away. And recycling, I would say recycling does at best 10% of what we use can be recycled. And in the US, only 4% actually is recycled. So it's a drop in the bucket. And meanwhile, all the plastics from all the plastic objects that everybody has around the house, it's just accumulating. When they're gone, when they go out, they pile up in various dumps They don't decay, they don't go away.
Yeah.
Except extremely, millions of years it will take.
Yeah. Do you think that's because many consumers are still unaware of the extent of the microplastic pollution issue?
The microplastic pollution issue was not thought about. Nobody really paid attention. There was a scientific paper about it maybe 30, 40 years ago. And it was just one paper and, that was it. And everybody continued studying their own things. But earlier this century, 2000 something, another group of scientists realized, sifting through the sand, there was all these colored particles, red and blue and yellow things among the sand that they were collecting. And they realized this was plastic mixed along the sand and the beach. And starting in the early 00s, there became, more scientific study, more public awareness, looking around at the garbage dumps, looking around in many countries where all the garbage is collected. And the U.S. used to ship all the plastic waste to Asian countries. Can't do that anymore. EU may have done that also. And so, these countries that are not the sort of economies that we are in the States are dealing with all our plastic waste, and they can't deal with it. So it's just a horrendous problem. The big pieces. The little pieces are a big problem also, but it's not as obvious as the big pieces.
Yeah.
But the problem with the little pieces, with the microplastics, is that, they are inside the bodies of everything by now. And we know a lot more about the damage being done to the fish and lab rats and some of them we do to ourselves. But there is evidence accumulating. They're finding it. That's it's a correlation. It's not saying it's causative, but every testicle of every man has microplastics in it, and sperm counts have been going down. Coincidence? Maybe. Correlation? Yes. And we can't say it's cause and effect, but perhaps, experiments could be done on rats, and you could do an experiment and you might find the same thing happening. So,
and in your opinion, how can we increase public awareness and encourage more sustainable laundry practices, or maybe reducing the usage of plastic overall even?
I think we need more podcasts like this all over the world. People talking about it. We need to have, a lot of articles in regular newspapers, a lot of things on what the youth are reading, the newspapers. The youth are on TikTok or various other, computer things. Get that information out to people of all ages, so that they're aware, whatever, if they read newspapers or they watch television or they listen to podcasts, whatever medium they use to get information, get it out on all of those things. Now, there are as another potential way, getting back to the laundry story, sort of rambling around lots of topics here, but getting back to the laundry situation, as I said, the current situation is that the washing machine captures the sewage treatment plant captures about 95% of what's coming out. But it is possible there are filters that have been invented that you can attach to your washing machine that will capture a lot of the plastics in the water before it goes out. And there are several different brands available. I have never seen them in a store, but I think eventually they may be available in stores. But you can look them up in the internet and purchase them and attach them to your washing machine. And then I hope there are very clear directions on what to do with all the lint that it collects. That you're going to have to take the lint off. It's basically lint, but it's made out of really tiny pieces instead of larger pieces. But that lint is from the clothing also, the bigger lint. Yeah. Anyway, of what to do with it and to put it in the garbage. And don't flush it down the toilet, because if you put it down the toilet, you're just putting it right back in the water system. Yeah. So, this one thing you learn when you work in the environmental field is there's no such place as away. Throw it away. Away is always someplace that somebody else cares about. It's not right where you are and you care and you get rid of it, but it ends up somewhere someone else cares.
Right. Yeah. It never just disappears. It goes somewhere else. So what do you see in the future of laundry practices in terms of addressing the issue of micropollution, both from a consumer perspective and in terms of technological innovations?
Well, I think, informed consumers can do the better than uninformed consumers, but there's a limit, in terms of what a consumer can do. Certainly, to know that fleeces, fabric fleeces, shed a whole lot more than any other kind of fabric, might make you decide to not buy a fleece jacket, buy a different sort of jacket. In general, looser fabrics, fleece being probably the loosest kind of fabric, but looser fabrics will shed more than a tighter weave. So that sort of information could inform what clothes to buy.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I was just thinking of getting a fleece coat myself because it's winter here and that sounds comfortable, but I don't think I will be sacrificing the environment for my comfort, unfortunately. I can always get other coats that will keep me warm anyway. There are alternatives. So, yeah.
And if you can buy something that's not made out of synthetic fabric at all, it's, wool or cotton, that's better. How many new clothes do you need? That's another issue. People are buying clothes, wearing them a few times, and then getting rid of them. Why? I have clothes that I've had for a very long time, and I wear them once in a while. I'm not a clothes horse, And, it doesn't really matter to me that I have new clothes all the time.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It's been an incredibly informative interview. So now move on to the open mic section, and this is your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about that doesn't have to be related to the topic. So the floor is yours. Take it away.
Oh God, not to talk about plastics.
Well, you can if you want to be honest.
I'll talk about singing. It's interesting. There's a lot of papers showing that singing in groups is particularly good for your mental health and your feeling of well-being. I've seen articles over the years, and they circulate through my chorus members, that it's really good for you. somehow you get a communal experience with the rest of the people. And during COVID, we were not able to have rehearsals. Everything shut down for over a year. And the director of our chorus made a plan that we could meet outdoors. And he sent us some music to learn. And we met outdoors in the park and stood around in a big circle and sang.
Oh.
And it was such a good feeling. And the people around who were just walking the park came around and stood around and applauded as we were done. It was such a wonderful thing in the middle of COVID, which was such otherwise awful thing to go through. And how buoyed we were by that, which has nothing to do with microplastics at all.
Well, yeah, it's a really beautiful experience. I feel like it's for a variety of reasons. Really, it's the teamwork, it's the camaraderie, it's the satisfaction from being able to harmonize with someone else. During COVID, I like singing too, but I don't do it professionally or in any like remotely proper setting at all. But during COVID, when we weren't allowed to have people over in our homes and I couldn't sing with my friend anymore, I went on YouTube and I found some YouTubers who do like specific harmony parts for certain songs. And there are all these different genres of YouTubers who do that. And a bunch of people were just playing these videos on YouTube because it at least was with someone else, even though it's through a screen, but you get that not same, but similar connection, you know? Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us, Judith. Before we end off, is there any advice that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
I would just repeat what I said before. You know, how many clothes do you need? And do you really need to discard them? You know, why not just hold on to them, wear them now and then? And, you know, this is just I don't know if it's true in Australia, but here among some groups of people, there's just a thing about having a new dress, having new clothes. And, you know, if you're going to a wedding, okay, you know, it's a different thing. But just without a special occasion, you know, think about how many new clothes you really need. And if you go to buy them, try to avoid synthetic fabrics, which is difficult.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It's been such a pleasure getting to know a bit more about the microplastic shedding situation and learning about the filter as well. I had no idea that there were filters that you could attach to your washing machine to help to catch all of the microplastics. So if our listeners want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Find out more about me, to put my name into Google and stuff will come up.
All right, we'll link some of Judith's links in the show notes. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you learned a bit about what to do and what not to do with your laundry, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to On the House, produced by the Household Management Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at hm.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Yastra. Thanks for tuning in.